o'clock. Now, how many government agency inquiries do we need into the allegations of data mining that have been levelled against Te Pāti Māori, Manurewa Marae and the Waiparea Trust? There's a police investigation, Stats New Zealand, they're also investigating, Health New Zealand is as well. The Privacy Commissioner is also probing the claims, and our Prime Minister Christopher Luxon, he's announced another one. It is an inquiry by the Public Service Commissioner. Is it all warranted or is it a bit of an overkill? Christopher Luxon joins us now.
Morning, Lloyd.
Thank you very much.
You've got some music going on this morning.
Oh, we've had lots of bangers, and we're just excited because Mel's back in the studio.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Just for Mel.
We've missed her. I think it's been 3 weeks.
No, I've watched all three of you. You're bopping along. It's great. Yeah,
well,
good.
There's a lot to be sad about, but there's also a lot to be happy about.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about this Te Pāti Māori inquiry. So for those who have just heard about this, these are allegations that Manurewa Marae encouraged people to come onto their property to do their census in return for $100 supermarket vouchers or wellbeing packs. That marae was run by Tash Kemp, who went on to now become the Te Pāti Māori MP. The person who is the president of Te Pāti Māori is also the person who runs the Waiparea Trust. Now, there's claims that they were mining that census data to then encourage people to vote, because that was a polling station and change from different enrolling. Anyway, they mined the data to encourage people to vote Te Pāti Māori is essentially the claim. They did that with some of the vaccination information as well. Now, they both refute those claims. Have I got that right? Is that kind of right?
Yeah, pretty much right. I mean, look, there were allegations middle of last week. They're pretty serious allegations, and what's important is that New Zealanders have trust and confidence in their public institutions, and so we're in very much a fact-finding phase to actually ascertain what exactly did happen. There's two parts to it. The first is the police and the Privacy Commissioner have compelling powers, or what are called compelling powers, so that they can actually talk to third parties involved in that, so the trust and the marae. Equally, the independent government agencies that have engagement with the data have actually also launched their individual inquiries. I don't think that that's enough. I don't think an individual agency looking at and reviewing its own activity is sufficient, and therefore that's why I put in place yesterday a Public Service Commission, which is an independent body to look at the suite of government agency actions and responses to it. And what are we trying to do there? Three things. One is make sure that while there's a series of individual agency investigations going on that could be quite narrow in scope, irrelevant to that particular agency, that I can get reassured that the sum of all of the government agency activity was appropriate. The second thing is make sure that New Zealanders can know that their data is going to be managed appropriately, the safeguards are being used, and I want to find that out whether that has been the case with the agencies. And the third thing is conflicts of interest, so that actually if those allegations are true, you've got data moving through a series of organisations, in part because people are wearing multiple hats, and so we need to understand whether conflicts of interest, real or perceived, have been managed appropriately. So that's the two things going on. One is the police and the Privacy Commissioner investigation will continue. It's important that this investigation doesn't cut across that, and I'm focused very much on the government agency responses and having an independent, arm's-length, objective review to make sure the response is right. Why? Because I want New Zealanders to have trust in their public institutions.
I mean, rumours were circulating about dodgy things going on at Manurewa Marae regarding this pretty much the day after the election, because the swing from Peony Hennaday to Tash Kemp was so huge from the election day to when the final results came out. When did you first hear about things not being okay there?
Well,
when did you first hear the rumours?
I heard the first story, which was around through the Electoral Commission around about the time of the election or just after the election, about treating, I think it was the story, and then obviously the story and the allegations that broke in the middle of last week.
Okay.
That's all I've heard. But again, whether the allegations are true or not true, it's important that there is a real, dispassionate, objective investigation, because that's in fairness to all parties involved. And so that's why I want to make sure that it's pretty objective, it's arm's length, it's done appropriately and independently, so that we've got that trust and confidence.
Did the Electoral Commission not do enough straight away if they'd heard about treating and giving people $100 pack and save vouchers and whatnot to come in?
Well, that's up to them as an independent body to make sure that electoral law was complied with. That's a decision that they get involved with in a number of issues. That's up to them to run that. Again, the Public Service Commissioner will look at the response of all the agencies across government.
Can this Public Service Commissioner inquiry, can it probe Te Pāti Māori, because it's not a government department, and that's where a lot of the information is going to be? Can they order people to come and talk to them?
Well, that's the point of the Privacy Commissioner, looking at whether there's been any contravention of data management, data laws, and the second piece is the police. And both those police and the Privacy Commissioner have those compelling powers
and will they
to look at
feed
those
into
actions.
will they feed into the Commission?
Well, they will do their own independent reviews, which they should, to make sure, because they can investigate third parties, in this case, as you talked about. But I've got to make sure that the actual government responses are really appropriate, so that I can reassure New Zealanders about trust and confidence in their institutions. So the reality is, with the Independent Public Service Commissioner investigation, coupled with the police and also the Privacy Commissioner, we should be able to, we'll be able to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's like a five-headed beast, isn't it? But I mean, fair enough, you've got to get to the bottom of it. Let's talk about MP accommodation allowances, because there's two stories that have popped up. One is about Tim Costley, who lives 45 minutes from Parliament. He lives in Waikanae, and yet he still claims the $36,000 allowance every year for a house that he owns in Wellington, essentially pays his mortgage. Is that okay?
Well, what I'd say to you is, as you well know, when we're in Parliament, you can work, you're lucky if you finish, you've got to finish each night at 10 o'clock. By the time you get out of there, it can often be midnight or even later. And then you're back the next morning at 7 to 8 in order to start the day doing select committees and reading and all that sort of stuff. So, the reality is Tim lives outside the Wellington commuter
But it's 45 minutes.
I'll just say to you,
50 minutes with traffic.
Yeah, but I think it's appropriate. He's got a young family. He actually, works incredibly long hours, starts early. If he's got, and sometimes, frankly, that journey can be an hour and a half in the mornings. The relative where he lives.
On your multiple road
on our wonderful new transmission gully, which is helping a lot. But the reality is, he lives outside the Wellington commuter range. He works late. He starts early. I don't think it's inappropriate that he does that.
Because there are people in the private workforce, the private sector, for example, people who work on this show who start at stupid o'clock, who are spending in 45 minutes, 50 minutes driving in from Beachlands or wherever. They're not going to get a house paid for by Warner Brothers Discovery, here. So that doesn't happen in the private sector. Why should it happen in the public sector? I just say to
you, look, there's a setup in Parliament where there's what's called the Wellington commuter range or area that's determined that it's not appropriate to have an allowance. In this case, he lives outside of that. He's actually got to work late hours. He's got to start early. He's got a family. I just don't think that's unreasonable.
Should that be changed, given you've now made roads that it takes? Because back in the day, it would have taken a long time to get up to Waikanae. But now you guys have built roads and there's motorways, pretty much 4 lanes all the way to Waikanae.
Yeah, well, those are ultimately decisions for Parliament to make, and we should respect those rules. If they need to revisit those, that's up to them to make. But all I'm just saying to you is, look, this guy's got a young family. He works late. He starts early. If you seriously think that he shoots home at midnight and he's got to be back in the office at 7 the next morning, he's got to be up at 6. That's the reality of these jobs when you're in parliamentary week. And I just think, look, it's not inappropriate.
What about the overall system, though, of MPs buying a property, and you've done this as well, buying a property in Wellington and then using that allowance to pay the mortgage on it? Or
well,
is that okay? Because in the end, when you are no longer an MP, you're a different example because you're a millionaire. You didn't have to get a mortgage to buy your property. But there are some people who get mortgages in Wellington. They buy a property and then they use the taxpayer allowance to pay their mortgage. And then once they finish as an MP, they've got a house and they can sell it.
Yeah, look, again, I'm not getting into the entitlements and the allowances within Parliament because that's set by a different body that makes those assessments.
But are you okay with that?
What's appropriate, right? Well, in many cases, you've got MPs that are down. Literally, you live in two places. You live in your electorate with your family, and then you come to Wellington to do a lot of work, either as a minister or as an MP. And whether people are staying in hotels, whether they're choosing to, purchase their own home, I'm quite relaxed about that in terms of it's whatever makes it work for them at a personal level, and as long as they're within the rules. Now, if the rules change, and that's Parliament decides to change the rules and change the remuneration, that's fine. That's up for them, and rightly so, to actually make those determinations because they go through a bunch of criteria and make those assessments about the nature of the work and what those entitlements should or shouldn't be. And I'm completely relaxed with that. That's their decision to do that. So I just don't think you want me and us making it up on the fly.
But I'm not asking you to make it up on the fly. I'm just saying for someone who has branded themselves as every single taxpayer dollar must be used wisely, is this wise? Because you're essentially giving houses to MPs.
Well, I just say to you, again, with respect to remuneration of MPs, we try and manage that independently away from us. And I think that's entirely appropriate. The public of New Zealand do not want MPs MPs mucking around with their allowances, remuneration. That should be set independently as it is, and that will change from time to time, and fair enough, that's completely reasonable. But all I'm just saying to you is also a little bit of the reality of these are quite unique jobs. I mean, you end up living and working really hard on the weekends and when you're not in Parliament in your electorate, and most of our MPs are all flat out Saturday, Sunday. I'm telling you, it's a 7-day gig, and then they come to Wellington and they work really intensely in select committees for 3 or 4 days that they're there as well, and they actually have to make their life work. And in many ways, when you're in the office at 7, I'm up at 4:30 every day. I'm usually in the office before 7 and ready to go, and then I might leave at midnight to 1, 2 in the morning, and then get back and get some sleep, and away you go again. So we've got extreme jobs. These are not where you are doing that co-location. But look, long story short is the rules are set by Parliament, and as long as they're followed and adhered to, and if they change, that's fine too. But I just think in this case, it's reasonable.
Okay, we've got to go. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning.
Good to be with you.
That is Prime Minister Christopher Luxon.